Hello and welcome to another episode of the 60 Go podcast. Been a while since we've done one of these. A bit of stuff in the way. Seeps, how are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Not too bad, thanks. Should just quickly explain. I went and got married, so a bit of a break. I tell you what, a lot involved in a wedding, isn't there, Seeps?
Mate, there is. And I've been married for near on 17, 18 years now. And I can imagine that it is a lot more expensive now than what it was then.
Yes, they certainly don't miss you when the term wedding comes up. That's for sure.
Oh,
But I did spend the honeymoon down in Melbourne. I got a chance to go see the Storm play the Dolphins, which is just the perfect romantic thing to do.
it is. Mate, and you know what? I dragged my darling wife to a footy game on our honeymoon as well.
Well, there you go. There you go. But just on that, Amy Park, first time I've been there. Have you been there?
Yeah, I've been there a few times. Yeah, it's a good venue.
It's fantastic. Fantastic
Yeah.
to watch. And the Storm were way too good for the Dolphins that day. I'll say that Harry Grant absolutely tore the Dolphins a new one that day. And I'll tell you what, heading into final Seeves, it's been a while since we've done one of these, but I know I'm a Storm fan, but I think the pressure's right on the Storm now. They deserve to be favourites, and heading into the finals, they look pretty good.
Yeah, they do, mate. It's a funny one with the Storm because they keep winning, right? So there's only been a couple of games over the last month where they've really made me sit back and think, gee, they are good. You know, apart from that, it's just, oh, well, they're just doing Storm things. They find a way to win even when they're not playing well. But now with the way a number of teams have lost key players or, you know, for example, Penrith, well, how long can you be up? We talk about Storm and Roosters have been up for a long time. But neither of those teams went to 4 grand finals in a row and won 3 in a row. You know, they had and for the Storm, their off year was, I think they finished 4th or something. But, you know, it's to keep a team up for that long at playing at that level, it's just a phenomenal effort. And you know what? If it was my last $1,000 and I had to have a bet on who was going to win the comp, I'd still go Penrith. But I think Melbourne are the favourites.
There seems to be a clear, well, before the weekend, there seemed to be a clear top 3, and then the rest were making up the numbers, I thought.
So were you going to include Roosters in that?
I was going to, but
yeah, even before the weekend, attack-wise, yeah, 100%. But mate, they're flaky. They're not interested in defending. But now I think they're in trouble because they've lost, 3 of their better players. The only thing that might help them is for them to be any chance, they're going to have to focus on defence, and that's the thing that they have been ordinary at. But sorry to interrupt.
You're right. I look at the Cowboys in 6th, and I just think, man, we've got a pretty weak comp, don't we? Like the fact that the Cowboys are there in 6th, they almost lost the other night to Melbourne Storm B team, and they just refused to defend.
So I think there's probably 6 or 7 good sides, and I'm going to reluctantly put the Cowboys in that because of the fact that half of their side is the Queensland Origin team plus the New South Wales hooker. So I think to me that says a lot about their coaching, the way they're coached. Because on paper, mate, as I said, they're an Origin side. They shouldn't be shit, and they are shit.
As it looks at the moment, Canterbury or Cronulla will fill out that other top 4 spot. Well, it looks like it's probably going to be Cronulla, but the Dogs, no doubt in the world, they've had a successful year. You can't class it anything other than fantastic for them, considering where they started from. But as far as premiership hopes go, I think we've got to pump the brakes there a little bit.
So yeah, who do you think wins this week between Cowboys and Dogs?
Dogs for me.
Because for mine, whoever loses it doesn't win another game all year.
That's probably a fair call. I'm
50-50. I really am with this one.
The Dogs were the only team all year to not concede 30 until Manly put, I think, maybe 40 on them on the weekend. So they've their consistency in defence is what I trust way more over the Cowboys.
100%. And again, I think if you had to hold me down and make me make a decision, I'm going to say Cowboys. Sorry, Dogs, because it's in Sydney. I trust the Dogs more than I trust the Cowboys. But I wonder whether or not that on the weekend when Manly give them a touch up, whether or not that was the balloon busting. They've been up for so long. They've overachieved. They've gone, way better than what anyone thought they would do. They'd been to Townsville, New Zealand, then back. So it was no surprise that they had an off game. I'm unsure whether or not it was just a blip or whether, okay, that's the bubble bursting. They've been up for so long, and it could be them for the year now.
There's 4 teams that are tied on 28 points, so tied for 8th spot. That's the Dolphins, Knights, Dragons, and Raiders. If you were the Bulldogs, who are currently in 5th spot, who would you least like to play out of those 4?
Well, I think realistically, it's for and against. Unless Dolphins and Knights tie, I believe there's no other option except for it to be Knights and Dolphins, whoever wins that game.
That's probably fair, yeah.
And look, you know what? Stranger things have happened. There's been a tie or two this year and last, so it could happen. I think they wouldn't want to play the Knights. I wouldn't want to play Kalen Ponga.
I agree, and there is the fact of look, once you're getting to the bottom half of the 8, you're not looking at complete teams here. You're not looking at gun teams who just have unbelievable structure. You're looking for people who can tear you apart, and Kalen's the one, isn't
he? Yeah, well, I think he and you know what, like Trbojevic is that man for Manly. They're blokes who can win games on their own. I don't think Cowboys have someone like that. I don't, Hemiso, yeah, he will have individually brilliant moments in a game, but he can't take a game and absolutely destroy it and win it on his own for 80 like Ponga and Trbojevic do. There's no one in that dog side that can do that. Yeah, and even, you know what, like even Cronulla, Nico hasn't played for 2 or 3 months now. He was down on form anyway. Yep, in form, sure. I'd let people argue that Nico could do that. And again, they're going to finish 4th anyway. I just think it really opens up. Like Penrith are, as I said before, look, if I had to pick a side to win the comp still, it'd be them. But they look tired. They look flat. I don't know if they can keep winning. I think Roosters are gone. It really opens it up for someone from that bottom part of the 8 to make the GF, because regardless of who wins those 2 knockout semis week 1, realistically, they're going to be playing Cronulla, who haven't won a final in, 5 attempts now, and you're playing a busted Roosters. So I can't see Cronulla or Roosters beating Penrith and Melbourne week 1. So it really opens up of the knockout games to make it to go deep.
I agree. Look, I'd be really surprised and disappointed if Melbourne didn't at least make the grand final from here. Like that, the road will go through Melbourne.
They'll have a prelim in Melbourne.
Yep, they'll be overwhelming favourites in each of the games that they play against these teams. You look at teams like Cronulla, Canterbury, North Queensland, Manly, Dolphins. Any of those teams, Storm would be heavy favourites against. That's why I think the pressure's on them, because and
you know what? Yeah, and the pressure is on, mate, because every team you just said has beaten Melbourne this year. They're the only teams that have beaten Melbourne: Cronulla, Manly, and Dogs.
Yep, it's
which they would have belief that they could beat them if they were playing them in a prelim.
Oh, I've got no doubt. And it's. I just feel like Craig's going to get one without the big 3.
So do I. I really do.
Yeah. So
I agree.
it was really great to see a couple of the younger forwards come through last week against the Cowboys. I thought a couple of them were really impressive, a couple of front rowers.
Yeah,
Um,
one
mate,
particular name escapes me, but he scored that great try where he
yeah,
went through and go.
yeah, exactly. We will touch on it. The Broncos clearly,
I'm,
sorry.
I'm coming off the back fence at the Broncos.
Let's go through a few uh, unnegotiables for the Broncos. Clearly a disappointing year, coming
Yeah,
off the final last year. Um, 10 wins out of 23. Uh, I would say that their last month in particular has been horrendous. I
their
remember,
last, their last 3 months
yeah,
has been horrendous.
I remember on my Bucks afternoon, we watched the Bulldogs versus the Broncos, and the Bulldogs teared them to shreds.
Yeah,
And in a must-win game on the weekend, the Dolphins, who looked bloody ordinary against Melbourne the previous week, just put a clinic on Brisbane, and a couple of people just tore them to shreds. Thought Herbie Farnworth was outstanding. The hammer was fantastic as well. Sean O'Sullivan did great things as well. But to be honest, they were just out enthused throughout the whole effort.
they are, mate. Their attitude is poor. Like the way they play footy is poor. They they give in. They don't look like they want to be there. You know, injuries are an excuse. Give me any team in the top four, and I'll tell you their injury history this year. Melbourne played most of the year without Munster and Nelson, so straight away, well, there's Walsh and Haas. So don't give me that excuse. Panthers, all right. So they've had Cleary for about 8 games, 9 games this year, haven't they? They lost their strike centre early for some off-field dramas. They've had Taruva injured a lot of the year. They've had Fisher Harris injured. They've had Sorensen and Martin injured at times. They're still sitting in the top three. Cronulla, they lost Nico all year, basically. They're still in the top four. We could keep going. Manly, they've had nearly half a year without Trebojevic. They've had a quarter of the year with no Olakau'atu. The big props have been injured. They both did medials during the year. They had Lodge, who's clearly, and you said it early in the year, Lodge is probably their best prop, and he proved that on the weekend. Well, he's been injured all year. They're still sitting sixth. So, the injuries are an excuse. It's a cop-out. People in the media wanting to constantly now blame players when they used to blame coaches. Take some accountability, put your hand up, say you got it wrong, the recruitment's wrong. And they've struggled. They shit the bed this year. People were happy to give it to me when Parramatta were grand finalists and then couldn't make the eight. One Arthur sacked. Yeah, you know what? He got sacked. So Walters has got clearly a much better squad in Brisbane than what Para have, and they're going worse. Anyway,
there's clearly issues at the Broncos.
yeah.
I think there is a real, and I'm writing about this later on in the week, and I actually have to be a little bit careful as how I write it. There's a poison in the Broncos, and I think that's clear to see. When you take out, Kev's been there 4 years now, and he's made the eight once, and they did make a grand final, and they are very close to winning it all. But looking back now, if you look at this year, there was no point throughout this year where you thought they were a premiership contender. And, we copped a bit of heat after about round 10 saying, oh, this is the grand final team. Well, there was no point from Las Vegas where they proved that they were going to be any sort of premiership threat throughout the year.
Well, I think we cop a bit of crap about being the Broncos. Is it the Bronco Hate podcast? Well, tell me when we're wrong. Last year they played well. We got it wrong. But that becomes now the anomaly.
That's right. That's right. And just going back on Penrith for a second, this is what makes them so ridiculously impressive. If you look at the team that they first played in the grand final and won against, South Sydney are rubbish now. Parramatta are rubbish now. We look at the Broncos have gone to rubbish, and yet Penrith are just the consistency.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. It's like teams empty the tank to get there. They get their heart broken, and then they find it difficult to to find their way back. And then clubs start to panic and, look, for mine, Arthur's been there for 10 or 11 years. Yeah. I can cop the fact that, okay, he's been there, he's had an opportunity, they stuck by him in tough times. But for me, see the year out. Para don't finish second last, or third last if Arthur sees the year out. Then I'm not saying they're making the 8, but they're 12th, 13th. They would have won 2 or 3 games just on the fact that Arthur's a 10 times better coach than Trent Barrett, who, by the way, is going to Brisbane.
Not only that, but I think it was very telling, Kev's response in the media this week when he had the press conference and he said, "That's not our club." And one journalist, I don't know who it was, but one journalist said, well, that is your club. You've had a few of these performances now, which have been rubbish. And then Kev snapped back at him. And to me, you just can't do that, because that journalist was 100% correct. And credit to him for not backing down and saying, well, what do you mean? The Bulldogs game, this game was a must-win game. You got smashed.
And the thing is, right, so with Walters and Ricky Stewart, because they are, they're legends as players. Stewart's a good coach, don't get me wrong, but they're legends as players. They're friends with a lot of the guys in the media because they played with them at every level of footy for so long. So they do get a bit of a free, they get more than a free pass. In particular, Walters and Stewart get a lot of stuff that gets let go. I mean, if we look at Stewart's record in Canberra, it's probably shithouse, really. They've made the finals maybe 3 or 4 times in the 7 or 8 years he's been there. So it's not great. I'm not saying he's the wrong person for that job or he shouldn't be a coach, because he's great. He is good. And he's probably the right man to coach Canberra. But no one ever talks about it. No one brings it up. Broncos are terrible. They are absolutely terrible. And it's hard because, I know some of the guys that are there. Some of them are really good people. So it's not a kick the Broncos while they're down or how good's this, I'm happy. Everyone knows I don't like the Broncos, so now I'm up on my high horse. I'm just saying how it is. I think that there's certainly some big issues there, and you see all the reports now coming out. And again, grain of salt. I know what it's like. 90% of the stuff that's written in the paper is just false. It's bullshit made up. Okay, but I'm reading today on social media, different platforms, that there's at least 4 or 5 players that have requested releases from the Broncos over the last 6 months, and some of the biggest names.
One other thing I just want to say on the Broncos, and let me go with this. I think the Broncos have, without question, the biggest problem in the league as far as their old boys go. And I won't mention names, but some of their old boys this week, some of the comments that they've made, actually not just this week, throughout the year, have been nothing. It's embarrassing. You look like fools, and it's nothing short of disgraceful. And they do the Broncos no favors by some of the comments that they make in relation to the standards of the club. You don't see successful clubs with this contingent of old boys commentating about it as much as they do. And I feel sorry for the players in a lot of ways, because some of the pressure that they get put on and some of the spin that comes out from some of these old boys of the Brisbane Broncos is nothing short of fanciful. And it's just laughable at stages. And in their own little crowd, I can imagine that they'd all be agreeing, but you look like fools.
I mean, they've been doing it for 5 years.
Yeah.
For 5 years. And there's one on Twitter in particular, and every now and again he gets an article in the Courier or on Fox. Seriously, you wonder whether he's even watched a game of footy in the last 2 or 3 years, some of the rot that he talks. And then there's other ones where you just sit there and some of the things that they speak about, you're like, you start to wonder, are you actually okay? And this isn't being, because I could be nasty and say you sound like you're a moron or whatever, but some of them are actually, you sit back and you think, I wonder if this person's actually okay. I wonder if they've, got way too many whacks in the head, because it's bizarre.
Some of the comments this week, and I get that a lot of these people are probably friends with Kevy and they're trying to stick up for him. I totally understand that. But if I was to play some of these comments back to these people that they've made this week,
they wouldn't care. They wouldn't care because they believe, and they that live in their own little world where what they say is right and they can't be wrong. So, and again, I've lived it. I've lived it for 30 years being a Parramatta fan. You know, rent a quote Brett Kenny. And Brett Kenny was probably my favourite player. And I think we missed the whole immortal chat and he would have been in our conversation if we did have it. But they're rental quotes, and they just go to them because they know they're going to get something outlandish. They know they're going to, say something stupid about the good old days and how much it was better there and everything now is rubbish. But it's the good clubs don't do it. Do you hear anyone at Penrith, any Penrith old boys coming out bagging them? Or trying to put their, 2 bobs worth in? You don't see it at Melbourne. I know for a fact that there's been high-profile people from Melbourne that quite often don't get asked to go to old boys events because it's like, they're a bit too,
It's the culture of the club that lasts past the playing.
Yeah.
And I just found some of it absolutely laughable this week, and that is why. Not only why, but that is a big reason why the Broncos haven't won since 2006. And being one of the power clubs, they really should take a look on the inside at some of the problems there, because I know that there would be a few. Just to finish off with, we did have a new immortal. If you could have your next immortal put in, who would you be barracking for the most to be put into the immortals?
I've got probably three that I find it tough to toss up between, and for completely different reasons. Cameron Smith, because I do actually think he's probably the greatest, the greatest longevity winner, etc. Brett Kenny, because I still think that he'll always be in the argument for my favourite player of all time. I love watching him play. People forget that quite often, not quite often, but there were times where, Wally moved to lock because Kenny was in the halves for Australia, things like that. So, everyone from Queensland will always throw the argument around, Andrew John shouldn't be an immortal. He had to play hooker sometimes. Well, Wally had to play lock. Wally was on the bench on a tour. Mel Meninga played on the wing or in the second row because Gene Miles and Brett Kenny were in the centres on certain tours. So that, Brett Kenny, and my other one is Darren Lockyer, just because I can't think of a bigger clutch player that I've ever watched than Lockyer.
I wrote about this in the paper a little while ago. Mine would be Glenn Lazarus. I think that Cameron Smith's the greatest player ever, but he's still got a few more years left. He'll be around for a lot longer, and I'm not saying that Glenn won't, but I just think that his impact on the multiple clubs that he was at, winning at multiple clubs, he was just outstanding. Siebes, thanks for your time. Enjoy the footy this weekend, hey?
Thanks, mate. Good to catch up.
This has been the 60 Go podcast, and that is full time.